Ever get that itch to build something cool with Python, like something that pops up a file selection window?
Yeah.
You know those ones, like the ones you see in pro software. Today, we're taking a deep dive into doing just that with Tkinter. And honestly, it's way more interesting than it sounds. We're using this Plus2Net tutorial to guide us, and they've got some really neat examples.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
So before we get into the code, let's set the stage a bit. Say you're building a simple app, maybe a text editor. How would you let the user open a file in the first place?
That's where Tkinter swoops in, specifically its file dialog features.
Okay.
Think of Tkinter as this toolkit for building graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, right within your Python code.
Right.
And file dialogs, those are like the bridges connecting your code to the files on the user system.
Okay, so the file dialog is the bridge,
Yeah.
but what does that bridge look like in the code itself?
Plus2Net uses this function called AskOpenFile. And it's pretty intuitive, actually.
Right.
They walk through a simple example. First, import the necessary modules from Tkinter, including the file dialog stuff. Then create a basic window like a blank slate, and you add a button.
Okay.
Clicking that button is where the AskOpenFile magic happens. It pops up that familiar file dialog we all know.
I can already see where this is going, how powerful this could be. But what about security? Does our code suddenly have access to the entire computer when that dialog pops up?
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Thankfully, no. Tkinter's built with security in mind. AskOpenFile doesn't just give your code free rein. Instead, it puts the user in control.
Okay.
They choose the specific file, and your code only gets access to that one.
That makes sense. It's like giving the user a key to a specific room instead of handing over the keys to the entire house.
But let's be honest, we've all been there, staring at a file dialog, not sure what to do, and just hitting cancel.
It happens to the best of us.
Did Plus2Net think about that in their example?
Oh, absolutely. Plus2Net tackles this head-on, which is a good sign of a well-designed tutorial.
They introduced this if file logic, which basically checks, hey, did the user actually pick something? If so, cool, let's proceed. If not, no problem, we won't crash the program.
So it's like a backup plan in case the user changes their mind.
Exactly. Good code anticipates what the user might do, even accidental clicks. Checking for an actual file before doing anything prevents errors and makes for a smoother user experience.
Okay, so we've got our dialogue working, we're handling cancel like champs. But before we dive into actually using the chosen file, Plus2Net jumps into customization.
And who doesn't love a little customization, right?
Exactly, who doesn't?
Customizing those dialogues is key for a really smooth and intuitive user experience. Plus2Net highlights some neat options. For example, there's Initial Clear. It lets you set the starting folder for the dialogue.
Oh, that's handy.
You ever have that where it opens up and you're lost in some random system folder?
That's like, where am I?
Right, like how did I even get here?
Yeah.
With Initial Pilder, you can spare your users that frustration. You could set it to open in documents by default or wherever it makes sense for your app.
It's all about making it easy for the user, right?
Yeah, exactly. Anticipating their needs.
That's such a small thing, but it makes a big difference. What other tricks does Plus2Net have up their sleeve?
Well, there's the title option, and it's pretty handy.
Yeah.
Imagine your app uses multiple dialogues, one for images, another for sounds, whatever.
Okay, yeah.
With title, you can change the window title for each one so it's super clear to the user.
So instead of a generic open file, it could say, choose an image or select a sound file.
Exactly. No more confusion, especially for new users. It's all about guiding them, making it feel intuitive. And speaking of guidance, Plus2Net covers file types, which is great when you need to filter what types of files show up.
Oh, that's a good one. I've definitely been in situations where I'm looking for a specific file type and the dialog box is just overwhelming.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. With file types, you can tell it, hey, only show me the CSVs, or whatever your program needs. It keeps things simple and helps prevent the user from accidentally picking the wrong type.
Plus2Net even shows how to offer multiple file type options, right? So you could have it open either a text file or a CSV, for example, but nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. Flexibility, but still organized, still relevant. So we've covered opening the dialogue, handling cancel, customizing the whole experience.
Yeah.
But what about actually doing something with the file once they choose it? Plus2Net wouldn't leave us hanging, would they?
I hope not.
They don't.
Okay, good.
They dive into that, but first, they bring in this thing called a string var.
I'm not going to lie, I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Let me clarify. So when the user picks a file, you probably want to display that file path somewhere in your app, right? Maybe in a text box or a label so they can see what they selected.
To the confirmation, right?
Exactly. That's where string var comes in. It's a Tinker variable specifically for storing and displaying text in your GUI. It's the link between that file path and actually showing it to the user.
Okay, so string var lets us take that file path and put it on display. Makes sense. But how do we go from displaying it to actually opening it up, reading what's inside? That's the real goal here, right?
Got it. Plus 2net provides a code snippet that shows exactly how. Once you have that path nicely stored in your string var, you can use Python's built-in open function.
It seems almost too easy.
That's Python for you. You choose the mode, like R for reading, and then use methods like read to grab the entire content or go line by line. Plus 2net breaks it down really well.
So AskOpenFile gets its foot in the door, and then Python's file handling takes over.
Perfect analogy.
Oh.
And plus 2net doesn't stop there. Remember how we talked about maybe wanting to select multiple files?
Yeah, what if I'm working with a whole batch of files?
Plus 2net's got you covered. There's this option, multiple, true, that you can use with AskOpenFile names. The user can select a whole bunch at once. No need to go through the dialog over and over.
That's a huge time saver.
Right.
When would you use that in the real world?
Imagine you're building a data analysis tool. Instead of making the user pick each CSV file one by one, they could grab a whole batch. Your code can then loop through them, extract the data, and you can make those fancy charts and graphs.
It's like giving your script superpowers, the ability to work with tons of files all at once. I'm starting to see how these simple dialog boxes unlock so many possibilities.
You really do. And there's one more trick up plus 2net's sleeve. Remember, AskOpenFile is for choosing a file. Well, what if they want to choose a whole folder?
Okay, now I'm really interested.
There's a function for that, of course, Ask Directory. It lets the user select a whole directory, and your application gets access to everything inside.
My mind is racing with ideas. When would you use that in a real-world scenario?
Think file organization, image galleries, maybe even something complex, like building your own music player. Instead of picking each song one by one, they could just point your program to their music folder and boom, instant library.
It's amazing how much power something as simple as a file dialog can give our code.
It really is. Kind of like learning a new word. Suddenly you start seeing it everywhere. Plus 2net even mentions using these techniques in a full-on text editor project.
Wow, building a text editor from scratch, using what we've learned about Tkinter and file dialogs. Where would you even begin with something like that?
You've hit a key point about programming there. It's often about breaking down these big, scary tasks into smaller steps. Think about what a text editor really does. It opens, edits, and saves files, right? We've already covered the opening files with AskOpenFile. Plus 2net even touches on AskSaveAsFile for saving, which is pretty similar.
And we could use Ask Directory if we wanted to let users organize their files within the editor.
Exactly. And don't forget all the customization we talked about, letting users choose fonts, colors, even creating macros for common tasks. It all builds on those core concepts.
It's both exciting and a little intimidating to think about how much goes into even simple applications.
That's programming for you. It's all learning and exploring. And with Python, you're not building everything from nothing. There are libraries and frameworks to help with error handling and user interface stuff, especially as things get more complex.
It's good to know there's a safety net. But speaking of challenges, what about those gotcha moments when working with files? Any things to watch out for?
One common trap, especially with something like a text editor, is handling file errors gracefully. What if the file doesn't exist or the disk is full?
Those are definitely things our code needs to be ready for.
For sure. Experienced programmers think about those what-if scenarios all the time and build in checks to prevent crashes and give the user useful feedback.
So it's not just about making it work, it's about making it resilient.
Exactly. And that's something that comes with experience and thinking ahead. The more you code and hit those weird edge cases, the better you get at anticipating them.
This has really opened my eyes. What started as a look into file dialogues turned into a much broader exploration of software development.
That's the power of fundamentals. Grasp those, and a world of possibilities opens up.
So for our listeners who are feeling inspired, maybe a bit intimidated to start working with files in Tkinter, what's one thought you'd leave them with?
Don't be afraid to play around. Start small, like a basic file opener or a little tool to organize your files. The key is to use what you've learned, and don't be scared to break things along the way.
That's a great point. Sometimes we're so worried about getting it right that we forget that making mistakes is how we learn.
Exactly. Embrace the errors, figure out why they happened, and use that to level up your coding. You'll be surprised what you can build.
Well said. Who knows? The next great text editor or data analysis tool might be just around the corner. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Python, Tkinter, and file handling. Until next time, happy coding.